board. So I will start this evening by saying hello to everybody. We have a nice group and I think we're going to have some fun. I am your presenter tonight and we'll sort of present an overview and then stop a few times here and there and let people have their say, because we've got a lot of folks here that have used critiques and all sorts of processes, and I'm sure they're much better at this than I am. I sort of issue critique groups. I have my reasons, mostly because I'm writing little bitty book reviews and hey, it's too late. Once I've written it, it's done. So anyway, we're glad to have you here. This will end up on YouTube and will be available for people to go and view. And there will be a chat that if you would like a hard copy of some of the information people are entering in the chat, then let me know and I can send that to you. Otherwise, let's get started. Our topic tonight is critiquing and beta readers. So, and I'm told that this is showing up for everyone, hoping that that's the case. Critiquing is an interesting topic because everybody kind of feels like it's something that's out there that they'd like to have or they have had. And sometimes it's gone well and sometimes it hasn't gone well, or people are looking for a critique group and they're just not sure where to find it and what they should be looking for exactly. So to start the evening off, I want to talk about, these are the people that I stole a lot of the information from. Because we are educational and I don't charge you anything, I think it's legal for me to share this stuff. So, but these are the links, and I'll be happy to send just this section to you if you want just these links. Or if you want to wait till next month, I'll probably plunk them into the newsletter. So whatever.
Linda, we're not seeing the share yet.
Okay, you're not seeing it. Who told me earlier that they could see the share?
It was there when you did it before, but it's not right now.
Okay, maybe I didn't share it. Maybe I just popped the puppy open there. How's that? Oh, there's my clue. I can see my screen behind it. Thank you very much. Appreciate the help. So this is that list, and see, they're very long. So I'm thinking it's better just to send them to you if you're interested. One of the things I want to start with is some definitions. People get a little confused about the difference between critiques and editing, and that's understandable because there are some similarities. But generally speaking, you don't want to get into editing until you're down the road in your writing, and maybe you've done a revision and or two, and you're ready to really have some people help you out moving forward. But anyway, what I ran across was that there are alpha readers, which I'd never really heard of before. And these are people that it might be one person who has your ear, they're a good friend, or they're somebody that's going to work with you on as you write your first draft. So you can, do a little part of a chapter, you can let them see it, see how it's going. But that's really, really way in the beginning, and you want them to be people you can trust, but also, and trust for one thing, to give you a good response. They should be giving you honest but kind feedback. Beta readers come along a little bit farther down the line. Once you have a manuscript that you're pretty settled on, you think that's going to be pretty much the way you're going to want to do it, at least before you get into your major editing, you might want to have a beta reader look at your work. These people, both of them, are readers. They're not writers. Now, they may also be a writer, but the purpose of a beta reader or an alpha reader is to give you the perspective of someone who may end up reading the book, some customer in a store that picks up the book and takes it home. Those are the people you're aiming at. So if Writers typically will get a little bogged down in looking at all the textures of your work, whereas a reader is really reading it for the fun. Can they understand it? Can they follow it? And they're going to give you some different questions. Then as you move along, you can get to critiquing, and critiquing comes in either might be just one other person, a critique partner, and that would be somebody that is a writer, and you and this person exchange your work and share the task of giving each other feedback on the kinds of topics that are covered in critiquing. And we will get to that a little bit later, but there are people that you can trust to be honest with you, to give you good upfront ideas and to help you along. Critique groups are simply, they're going to function quite differently, obviously, because you have a number of people involved. One of the benefits of a group is that you've got a lot of different kinds of people with different strengths that they bring to the group. Some people may be very strong in dialogue, others may be very strong in pacing or maybe in making sure things are following a good timeline, that things don't get confusing. And so it's a benefit to have a number of different people offering you feedback like that. The downside, of course, is that you can end up getting so much feedback from different directions that it can kind of be overwhelming. Like, oh, so-and-so said this, and so-and-so said that, and they're not in agreement, so now what do I do? Well, realize the fact that you never have to use anybody's feedback. These people are trying to help you. They're giving you the best advice they can, hopefully, but it doesn't mean that you have to do what, or even respond to what they have suggested. And you're not in the editing stage, so it's not like they should be looking at your work from a technical standpoint like that. And they shouldn't be trying to redo your work for you. And we'll get into some of the bad and the ugly down here as far as critiques go. But it is up to you to decide what you want to use and what you don't. Now, I mentioned earlier that critiquing is not editing. Editing, when people edit, they're working on things like your punctuation. Did you use the right word? Also grammar, how the thing holds together, sentence structure. And that gets really, really nitpicky and detailed. But in this case, there is some overlap because primarily critiquers they're acting like editors at the developmental stage. They're looking at major plot and character issues. There are content edits. That's more in-depth issues about plot, character, setting, pace, things of that sort. And then line edits in the editing process translate into this. It's just looking an overview of how is your phrasing. Do you tend to be repetitive, or is your phrasing kind of I suppose sing-songy or things like that? Literary devices, if you've tried one of those, did you use it well? And as you can see, that's why it's important for critiquers to be writers, because they're the ones that are going to recognize. A reader may be able to tell you, I don't know, there was something about this that just threw me off totally, and I don't even know why. But a writer should be able to recognize some of the reasons for that. And I am going to stop this right at the moment, and we'll come back. And I'm hoping or thinking that perhaps some of you have comments about your own experiences there. Now, remember, we're going on to some of the other parts of this whole idea later. So anybody want to agree with or disagree? Denise?
Yeah, I had an experience. And it's my own fault. So I'm part of this. So I'm going to a workshop down in New Mexico this summer. And I was actually accepted into it 2 years ago, but because of COVID, it's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And we're all finally going. And so this is my own embarrassing story, but because I'd only had experience with like a few trusted critique partners, like people that we share everything, oh, that didn't sound very good. You need to go back and fix that kind of thing, so I was more relaxed. And so these people weren't, I didn't know them as well. And I probably shouldn't have been as relaxed. So I think I kind of insulted a couple of them. I was a little too open with my opinions, but it was just new. I think that would be my comment is, when you're new to a group.
Right. Yeah, that comes up.
You're a new writer as far as sharing your work. I kind of.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had to share that.
Well, thank you. And I think you'll see that we'll be talking about that a little bit later, because it is one of the embarrassing things. But Paul?
Yeah, only problem I've had with critique groups is you don't want to share your stuff with somebody you know, love, really like, deal with all the time, because they're going to be too nice to you. And there's a problem with critique groups. Pretty soon you get to know each other well enough that you don't want to make them feel bad. And so you end up not getting very good critiques. So one has to be concerned that you got to say it like it is, or say it as it is. And you got to be thick-skinned enough to take it when somebody rips apart your little children.
Good point. Yeah, we'll be talking about some of that later. Sue, did you I've got Sue and Janet they've got your mic's open. Did you have something you wanted to say either? Oh. Well, okay, you can always come back to this stuff. Let's move on then to the next section. Let's get this going on. It's not as long as you think, actually. Okay, people who are looking for a group, what kind of critique partner group do you need? One of the suggestions is, if you're working, we've moved past beta readers, we're now talking about critiquing. And so these are writers. And writers theoretically have strengths and weaknesses. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. As much as I'd like to think I'm perfect, it's not true. So one of the things you may want to look for in a partner is someone who has a strength in an area where you're greatly weak. Because you want your end product, your story, to be believable, you want it to flow, you want it to be entertaining. So whether it's you're weak in dialogue, or you're weak in character development, or in world building, any of those things, you can benefit from somebody who has strengths in those areas. Another thing to consider is you're going to want to work with this person for a while, probably, or this group. And do you need to meet with them always on Zoom? Now, in my case, if I were going to partner with someone, I would do Zoom. I would not likely go out, at least for another year or two. You would not see me out in public in a restaurant sitting around. So if you have to do all Zoom or some other format, or if you have to do all in person or whatever, you're going to want to have someone, an individual or a group, that can deal with your schedule and you can deal with theirs. Now, there are some groups, some large ones on like Facebook and other places that are huge. They have hundreds of people. You can connect with people on there and work out ways to share critiquing. But a good group is usually going to be 3 or 4 people, maybe up to, I know one of the people I researched said she had 20 in her group, and it was an offshoot of something else that was online that was way too huge. And so they whittled it down. One of the things is, if you start with a large group, you have a better chance of maybe finding the smaller number of people that will actually meet whatever criteria you need. So that's way to maybe get an in. Okay. Then while you're doing that, I love this part, why you need to recognize a good or bad writer's critique group. If you get involved, depending on how thick your skin is and how strong you are, if you're sure of yourself, you may be able to be in a critique group for a while and get battered about pretty badly. You can even leave, but hopefully you'll be able to leave and still feel good about yourself and know that it's the other person's problem and not yours. So it is important to try. You can always try with a group that's already existent if they'll let you maybe visit and say, I would like to see, how the group is and what it would be like if you don't mind. There are some things to look for, 5 signs of a good critique group. A good critique group is going to be able to function as a critique group. It's not a social gathering. It's not a place to get together and talk about your dates or anything else. This group needs to be able to do constructive feedback. And it's going to focus on what a writer is trying to do or say and how to make that effect or story as clear and impactful as possible. The group is going to have a considerable amount of positivity. This isn't a group that's supposed to abuse you verbally. They're not supposed to emotionally batter you about. They're supposed to offer positive feedback that will help you grow as a writer. Groups can sometimes get all off into things like spelling and grammar checks, and they're more like copy editors. So you want a group that's going to act more like a developmental editor. They're looking at the big picture and the overall sense of your writing. You need to have a thick skin, and so does everybody else in the group. You need to be able to be honest as you critique others, and you need to be able to accept their critique honestly. If you can't handle any criticism, this is not abusive criticism, this is straightforward factual, and we'll get into a little bit of that later. But if you can't handle that, then you really need to toughen up a little bit before you go into a critique group. And finally,
even before you start writing.
Yeah. A group will have a good chemistry. People are different and we don't all get along. Personalities don't always mesh, and you want to have people in your group that are simpatico. In other words, they don't all have to be your friends. You're not trying to make lifetime friends. You're just trying to get people that will be able to work with you, and you can work with them and be civil and be kind and helpful. Here's some, that same person offered 5 red flags of bad critique groups. Destructive feedback. Number 1, they should not be writing your story for you. People in critique groups frequently know that they know better how your story ought to be told. And they're just wrong. It's your story. It's what you want to say, and you have a right to say it, not them. They can write their own darn story. They will give all negative feedback or all positive. And that's what Paul was mentioning before, where people will say, they may say, well, this stuff just sucks. You're a bad writer. I mean, I'd give it up if I were you, or at least go back to school and learn how to write correctly. Or they will be effusive, maybe. Oh, this is wonderful. I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's just, you should be the next bestseller in the country. Well, neither one of those is usually true. It just isn't. Sometimes bad critique groups will focus on things that really don't matter. They're not at this point dealing at all with, they're not doing grammar. They're not doing anything about punctuation. Things of that sort. They're not editing. They shouldn't be looking at little nitpicky things. Now, when I'm very tired and I'm trying to work with somebody in a small group and I'm critiquing, I'm apt to slip into this one. I have to always remind myself, I don't care if they don't do punctuation the same as me. I could be right, they could be wrong, or vice versa. And it really doesn't matter because I'm not editing their work. And so we want to keep it where it is. This is critiquing. Some people are defensive or argumentative. Frequently, people are defensive if they are unsure of themselves, and they will argue with everybody else because they have a great need to prove they're correct. And I think all of us as human beings sometimes either do this or wish we could. And so that's not really good. You don't want defensive people, and you don't want to have to be defensive. And see, and then you've got egos and attitudes, and that's obvious. Some people are just arrogant, or they can't communicate effectively, and they're not going to be giving you a good critique group. Now, before I go into a good critique itself, I'm going to back out of this and we'll see what people may want to say about that. Any ideas so far? Did any of you already, you somehow at some point picked a critique group? What criteria did you use, or how did you get into it? Yeah, Paul?
Well, I was going to say, maybe your writing isn't very good, and you have to recognize that you're going to have to do something about it. So maybe that person is not wrong, for one thing. Another a group I was in, the leader insisted that we not argue. We do not open our mouth when somebody else is giving a criticism.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is that even though you may have a good reason for what you did, or in your own mind, eventually the reader is going to have to get it without explanation.
Mm-hmm.
The explanation in what you write is all they're going to see. So if you have to argue, then you've already admitted that you haven't done a good job of presenting the case.
Well,
I think the other thing I like to say is that most of the time it is a fine line between being openly critical and being helping me helpful for the person that you're critiquing. You know, open to criticism, and also being able to show that person that this is an alternative way of doing it. And you want to try it, you know, see how it looks on paper.
Anne, I hear your background. I can't really make you out.
Sorry, I'm trying to get everything reset because I lost you for a moment.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, muting now. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. Anybody else have a comment to make? Some of you have been in a critique group before, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. How did you choose your group?
I only knew of one or two, and that was that. I didn't go scouting around for it.
Mhm.
I took a class. And then some of us stayed together as a critique group afterwards.
Mhm. Mhm. Paul?
I went to in Northwest Writers Group meeting, and they had a critique session afterwards where they just assigned people to groups,
Mhm.
and the group kind of clicked, and we went on from there.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, Paul and I were in one group together for a number of years, and might need to clarify what he was saying. In the group, let's say there's 8 of us, we all bring 8 copies of what we're going to read, and then we give that out to people in the group. So as we are reading it out loud to them, they can make notes on their copy. And when I'm done, let's say, we go around in a circle. It's not a free-for-all, and people say their thoughts or whatever that might be. So we go around the table, and then after that, the reader is asked if there's something they want to say, and it can be defensive or to clarify something, or but it's certainly don't want to have arguments in any sort of a group or around the kitchen table. So it's been a very good group for me. I'm still in that setting, and the tough thing is that as people go around the table and say things, the reader has to be quiet, and that takes a discipline that has to develop. And I think it's a good way to go. Otherwise, it's a real free for all.
Yeah, yeah.
There's two reasons for that. One of them is that if you discuss it, then it takes too much time.
Mhm.
Yes.
And another reason is that it ought not to be confusing. If you wanted to make a point and you didn't make it, you're going to find it out because somebody's going to say something
Right.
about it. So recognize that, and you recognize their comments as this is the way it appeared to them. Again, like you said, you don't have to take their advice, but you really need to listen to it.
Yeah.
Well, another point with that group is that, if you like what you've written so much and went out there and published it, people are going to read the book and they won't be able to talk to the author and say, I wonder what they meant here, or I don't understand this part, or they sure goofed up their grammar here, and the author will never know about it.
One of
Because
the
it's just-
things you can always do is, if you receive feedback, the group, let's say there's 5 people and 3 of them all agree on a certain thing, then you can pretty much assume that there's something about that was not easily understood or what have you. And,
Yeah.
But if everybody's got 5 different opinions, then I wouldn't worry about it because they're being very subjective. And, Steve.
Yeah.
I just wanted to address the question about how groups get formed, et cetera. And my group came together because I was a teacher, and 3 of the 5 people in our group are past students of mine. We've all published now, and we have a process that we did meet, such as Paul and Mark were talking about physically. And we did that where we brought copies and shared all that. When COVID came into place, that really was a blessing to us because we moved to the virtual setting. One of the things we did was to establish a web page where each one of us has a folder, and we simply drop what we'd like to have critiqued into the folder. And then so we can just at our leisure, take a look at what somebody wants us to critique. And then we go ahead and actually, we use Google Docs, so we can actually make comments and critiquing directly on the document. And that identifies, when you do that, it identifies who's doing the critiquing, so you can actually tell, where it's coming from. And that has just turned out to be a real blessing in terms of getting a lot done and fitting people's schedules.
Well, I am going to break in here and continue on. We've got about 15 minutes before we would traditionally end. We can always go a little bit later, but I don't want to keep people too long. And I'm going to go in here and go on with this because there's some good stuff coming up. We've got what goes into a good critique. We talked a little bit, but here are some things. And again, I can mail this out to folks. Some ideas to get you started. If you're critiquing, or if you want people to critique your work, you could tell them that you want some of these things looked at. Points of confusion. Somebody's laughing. More description is required to visualize the scene, more human interaction, tension may be sagging, more or less action may be required. You may have pacing problems. It goes too fast, sometimes slows up, gets too boring. you may feel bored overall. Character problems, characters that just don't quite cut the mustard. They don't make sense. Their personality, everything about them just does not, it doesn't seem realistic. They may not be distinguishable from each other. Sometimes a writer puts too much of themselves into the work and it's all them. Things seem implausible. You may have plotting problems. Say what emotions you feel as you read. The author may not have intended to evoke those emotions. That's an important one because people sometimes don't really understand how what their words are going to trigger in others. Let's see, emotions of the character, but you as the reader can't feel them. There's dialogue problems. It's too stiff, it's too loose, it doesn't fit the character. The command of the language, phrasing is poor, ineffective word choices or repeated words, numerous spelling, punctuation, or grammatical errors. Now, this is an overview. You're not editing, but you're noticing that this thing's a mess. So somehow you have to gently let that person know by suggesting, you know, I realize you may be in a hurry, but you might want to double check some of this punctuation and grammar stuff because it kind of tripped me up here and there. Unintended changes or inconsistencies of point of view. You get lost, you don't know who's talking because you were listening to so-and-so and now suddenly somebody else is talking, you don't even know what happened. So, and tenses, we may have been in the past, suddenly we're in the present with the language. Then you may look at things that the person has done and say, okay, you've got some positive stuff here. I really like the way you phrased this text. This really moved me. That character, I'm assuming, excuse me, is a bad guy or what, I just hated that guy. Because you're sure that that's what the writer intended. Or there's characters that you just love. So, man, this made me think of my kid brother. I really love this kid. And that was great. And then talk about maybe some sections of the book that held your attention. The reason these are important is that you're telling this writer more of this. We need more of this. We need these kinds of sections. We need this kind of writing. We need your characters. If you want us to care about them, write them like this. They don't have to be the same characters, but like that. And I think that basically you're reviewing the work rather than editing, okay? We have an upcoming session where we'll talk about editing, and I think you'll be able to get a little bit of the difference there. But okay, now I'm down to the fun part. Groups, the good, bad, and the ugly. This is great. This guy came up with some stuff. First of all, the good, it's just sort of repetitive. You're here to help people write their work, to improve their work. So you want to give your feedback in constructive terms. Say specifically what does work, what does not work, and why. Try to comment on both the positives and negatives. Have respect for differing opinions. Do not insist that others adopt your style, your morals, or your values. You're not here to tell them what this world ought to be like in their writing. You just want to tell them if maybe this person who had a moral flaw over here and suddenly they did something out of character, you may want to point that out and say, you know, I don't know what happened there because I thought they were this kind of person and suddenly they're doing this. Maybe they had a reason for writing it that way. Be sensitive. This fellow that wrote this part said, you know, you don't have to give a critique when you're in a group. When there's something that puts you off so badly, and it may be a slasher book where somebody's writing really gory details about murder, and maybe you have reason to find that too much. You can't handle it. You can just say, I'd rather not comment on this piece. Again, do not argue. You don't have to defend. You're simply listening. I got it. thank you. That's all. Because you're going to walk away and decide whether you want to bother with that or not. And then there's a few other things. If you're in a group, be on time, honor your commitments. If you said you do this much, do that much. Okay, then he got to the bad. These are mistakes that people make. Critiquing another writer's style. It's not your business. Style belongs to the writer. Forcing your personal vision onto someone else's story. Again, it's not your story. Don't tell them what kind of vision to use. Offering solutions. There was a neat quote from Neil Gaiman. He said, when people tell you something's wrong or doesn't work for them, they are almost always right. When they tell you exactly what they think is wrong and how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. And he's right about that. Okay, dominating the discussion like I'm doing right now. I have a reason for doing this because I'm trying to get through all this, but I am dominating the discussion. Ignoring the big universal issues. I love this. It says there's continuity errors, like when Susie Q had blonde curls on page 5 and then a brown ponytail on page 6, something's not right there. Factual errors. The main character 6-shooter shot 8 rounds, which happens a lot, I think, evidently. Plot holes. When the side character had the map to the safe zone and didn't use it to save her friends. Word choice errors where you just have absolutely used the wrong word. Maybe the character was bemused when she meant amused. So you might gently point something like that out and say, this word threw me. Are you sure that this was meant correctly? You know, you might want to look those up. Anything confusing, don't argue with the feedback. These are bad mistakes people make. Fixating on spelling and grammar. I have traditionally, that's one of the reasons I'm not in critique groups, because I can't stop myself from doing proofreading. I absolutely can't, and it drives people crazy. Okay, being too honest or not honest enough, we know what that means. Showing up without pages when you said you'd have them. Okay, I love this part, the ugly. This guy, Dr. Pat Etchison, and his link is up there above, but he came up with the 4 horsemen of the writing group apocalypse. And these people, if left to run loose, can actually destroy a group. So, and you're gonna laugh when you get down to the 3rd one because she's named Linda, but anyway. Critical Colin. Colin is always right. His eagle eye spots every typo, hanging participle, and use of passive voice. He's a whiz at seeing weak characters and plot holes. Because he's always right, he rebuffs any and all criticism of his own work. He is generous with his critique, all of it negative, and tells you what you should do to fix things. Sometimes Colin simply declares that the piece didn't work, folds his arms, and sits back, judging silently. Colin is writing literature. He despises genre fiction. I can recognize people there in the past. Let's see, arrogant Alice. Alice gives you the gift of her presence at every meeting. You're truly fortunate to have her, as she is really a bit too advanced and or successful for the group. Alice may be traditionally published, or she may have self-published before in the other members of the group. She may have won a prize or know a famous author slightly. Either way, she is faintly condescending and never misses a chance to remind you of her greater accomplishments. She is an author, not a mere scribbler. Lazy Linda. Linda wants to write, really she does, but life conspires against her. She fails to give her apologies and attends less than half of the scheduled meetings. She either brings nothing or an incomplete 500-word first draft that doesn't make sense. Linda has fewer domestic responsibilities than you, but she still can't find the time to write. At coffee break, she regales you with the long story of how she didn't write anything this month because she was busy. When it is her turn to set the group challenge, she has nothing prepared. She does not complete her own challenge. And blind Brian. Brian wears blinkers which shield him from anything he doesn't want to see. He is loud and talks over others. He attacks writers, especially quieter ones. For errors, he commits himself. He strays from the point to keep discussion where he wants it, on his opinions or his work. His work may have merit, but he resists any constructive criticism that could improve it. He passionately argues some detail because, unlike others, he cares about his work. He doesn't recognize social cues such as checking a watch, sighing, or impending tears. Pursue you at coffee time to discuss the finer points of something or other that you don't care about. And then we're for the last bit, but I'll stop there for a sec because the last bit's really quick. How to find a group or ways you might look for one. Okay, comments, input, suggestions. Have you met any of these people?
I have met the enemy and he is me.
Oh, I've done it. I've done all of those things at some point.
Me too.
Sadly.
Yeah, we are human beings after all, and you know, until we learn better.
This is bringing up that I think I need to email that gal and say I'm sorry.
Email which? Oh, the art.
The gal that I critiqued and didn't do a very good critiquing job because I was definitely one of those people, and I feel very bad about it now, and I think maybe I should tell her.
Yeah, it's easy to do. We, you know, and we do get tired and we do get wrapped up in life, and sometimes we lose patience and we're working on something. One of the reasons I don't do critiques is, and I don't mean this as a lazy Linda, trust me, I write so many reviews, I mean, 40 a month, okay? And I write so many reviews that my writing steam is shot. And that's about all I can do. And if I try to critique somebody's work, I'm like, oh, well, I don't know if that didn't make sense or it's me and my brain doesn't make sense. So it can be a chore. It's hard work, critiquing. Being critiqued is hard because you have to be prepared to have your babies attacked in a way, even if it's done gently and nice. It's like your son seems to have a little problem, doesn't he? You know. And
Linda,
what?
and this is Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
I'm just saying, you know, I've been on both ends of that, and I have received some not severe, but you know, critiques that surprised me.
Yeah.
But I've learned from every one of them. I've really learned, and I know that as the writer, I have the choice to accept it, to change it. But most of the critiques that I've had have really helped. So I know, and I really try not to say too much most of the time.
Well, you know, when people come to a group and ask for critiques, theoretically, that's what they're there for. They want help. They want you to, I mean, they've maybe worked with a manuscript for so long, they no longer can, you know, they can't tell whether they like the characters anymore, don't like them, they don't know where it's going. And they need somebody to come in and say, you know, maybe help them see where they slipped off the road. Whoops, I think everything was going fine and then this happened. And I don't know where it went after, you know, and you can go, aha, I think I found my problem, you know. So, and the basic idea is that people are meant, this is meant to be part of the process when you're doing revisions.
Mhm.
This is not after you've got everything all written and tidied up.
No, you can get tired of your characters though. It's like, I don't want to see this character for quite a while.
Yeah, you can turn a nice person into somebody that wants to slap them around. You know, I mean, you just kind of get to the point where I can't get this character wrestled into what the kind of person they're supposed to be to make this a success, and it's driving me crazy. What is that old funny saying? Is something about I've only got one nerve and you're on it, you know.
You're standing on it.
Yeah. So
The problem is that that one nerve is usually holding, I don't know, like 6, 10, 15 characters.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it can be. In your case, you write some pretty large stories to my memory. You were talking about your world.
Yeah, my original, that's a good 4 books, and that's just getting through book 1. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Steve, you
w-
had your hand up there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the critique group that I'm in now, we have moved away from the volume of critiquing that we're doing, and we're really kind of focusing on a specific, like I've got a piece right now in the book that I'm writing that I want that little section addressed. But the other thing that has happened, and I think that, Mark mentioned that he's still in the group. This group that I'm in has been together now for, I'm thinking like 5 or 6 years. And we've come to know each other fairly well, so we can really kind of cut to the chase rather quickly. But the other part of it is, it has shifted away from being so much a critique group, and it's becoming more of a support group. We still do the critiquing, but we provide an awful lot of support. And a lot of that support's around the mechanics of writing as promotion and all of that, such as what we've done with Kickstarters and all of that.
Excellent. Well, that's just it, is if the group agrees on changes like that, there's nothing that says your group can't be of a certain type. Paul?
Well, the main reason I like critique group is that I can come up with something that sounds really nice in my own mind. And I've got all the things tied up in a neat little knot. But then when I expose it to other people, I realize it isn't all that nice and tied up in neat little knots. It really needs that second brain, third or fourth or fifth brain, looking at it to make sure that it makes sense. It'll make sense to the reader.
Sure. Good
And
point.
the group that Paul and I were in for a number of years, I'm still there. It started 30 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And there's only one member who's the leader of our group, Ruth Danner. And I started over 10 years ago. But we found that if somebody brings a 6-pack of beer, we all get along better.
There you go. Joan, you've unmuted your mic. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. I wanted to share how I got in some of the critique groups. I was like Denise, one group in Spokane, I took a writing workshop and found members, and we stayed together for about 10 years. But most of them are, old. One has died. And so I was looking for another critique group, and the PNWA has monthly meetings, and they have a critique group afterwards. And what they do is you read 3 double-spaced pages. And at first they were putting everybody in mixed groups, like thriller mystery would go with memoir or science fiction. You had all kinds of different people, but it was really helpful, some of those people. And I then at the end of the meeting, you'd put your email in the chat, and you find critique partners that way. And I found some. And then they had a meeting where it was all mystery and thriller writers. You got in those groups, and that was kind of interesting. But one of the girls liked to do it in Google Docs. And Steve, you said you liked Google Docs, but I absolutely hated it, because what I like to do is print it out and have a hard copy and go over it. And then our group, we make changes on the hard copy or make comments. And then we don't read it at the session, via Zoom. We just discuss it, what our comments were. And so that cuts down on a lot of time. And I like that a lot better. I hated Google Docs because you couldn't print it out. And I just didn't like it at all. So
Let's
There's
see,
an,
an
there is an
example.
alternative. If you use the the Microsoft Cloud, they have a version of Word that you can all work together on. Pretty much the same as Google Docs, except it works better.
Yeah, it's one of the things that is important, I think, when we're talking about finding a group that meets your needs. That's important, the mechanics of it, not just how often and where and when can you meet, but how are you going to deal with parceling out things, so and responding. Well, I got that one little bit left. I want to finish up where to find a critique partner or group. And this was just a listing of various things you might be able to use. As you are doing now, attending events, workshops, and online meetings, go snooping for other writers. You can go into Google and do some searches. Every once in a while, I just put in certain kinds of, like I put in critique groups, critique partners, things, beta readers, and I came up with tons of good references. You can check, a lot of people don't realize that groups like meetup.com, you can go on there and you can look for writers groups, either that are going to function online or locally. Up till recently, I had the meetup group and I canceled it because they wanted a whole bunch of money to continue having a group on there, and I wasn't about to do that. You know, $100, whatever, every 6 months was just too much. WordPress, you might find some people on there with critique type groups. Goodreads, Wattpad, internetwritingworkshop.org, writing.com, and critique.org. Those are all some potential sites. I have fallen in love with Readsy. Readsy is an online organization that kind of, it does a more high-class version of what we do with our meetings, but they have a lot of free workshops you can go to. They're trying to, like I went to one, they try to pique your interest with the topic, and then if you're looking for somebody that offers that service, you can check out the people that they have registered with them, because they'll have several hundred people that are editors or whatever. And these people cost money. We're talking professional editors. About blew me away. One of the people on the thing said something to the effect of $1 a word. These people, you know, you're talking $80,000, right? And they occasionally said if they were really excited by somebody's project, they might dicker a deal. But in general, they said it's so hard for a book to make any money that they're not about to just sign an agreement to do your editing for what do you call it? I can't even think of a term now. Come on, help me, Steve. They give you money as you sell.
In advance?
Royalties, stuff, or
On consignment?
No, it's the money you get, royalties. Thank you.
royalties, yeah.
Thanks, brain. My brain there kicked in. And so they said they almost never do deals for royalty split because it takes forever, if ever, to make any money on a book after the initial payout for the author. So anyway, and that's just a little aside. There are writing associations, you know, look for those because there may be somebody in the area that has a local version of that's attached to some major writing association, and that may have some offerings. Conferences and retreats, you may be able to meet people there or, you know, pick up on a group there. And then the November NaNoWriMo, you can always go to that site and get involved with it all throughout the year. And you can find other people on there that might be able to help, you know, or be interested in working with you. And certainly they have that as a service, I think, on the actual NaNoWriMo site. If the guy says you can find a good critique partner almost anywhere, your local coffee shop. And I was thinking, okay, you just sit down at the coffee shop up at the bar and you say, okay, I'm looking for a critiquing partner. Anybody? I couldn't imagine how that would work, but hey, maybe people find people that way. The Writers Helping Writers Facebook group, the National Novel Writing Month forums, which is NaNoWriMo, Romance and Mystery Writers of America, or any writing organization with a message board. Did I not share that again? Doesn't look like I did.
You didn't have it up. No.
It wasn't important anyway to have it up, I think, at this stage. I pretty much told you what it said. So anybody want to add to those ideas for where you think you'd find a good, I mean, I suppose the library, you might check that. Here in town, we have Spark Central. That's a location, and a lot of these are starting to open up again. So you can actually go in there and, and see other people, make contact. So might be worth trying.
Linda, I don't mean to interrupt you, but yes, Spark Central has drop in and write on Tuesdays, every Tuesday at 5:30.
At 5:30?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there you are. You could drop in, write, and then coerce somebody else. I mean, see if you can find someone that might want to help. You know, we whenever we have an issue, I don't care if it's for information or for connecting with others or whatever, there's always this first tendency to just look at it and think, oh, how do I do that? Well, it can take a little time, but follow some pathways, and usually you're going to end up where you need to be. I'm a person who believes that what you need to find, you will find. I just have faith in that.
If you look.
If you look, yeah, you can't just sit there and say, I don't know how to do that, so I won't try. Because what can happen? Nothing's going to happen. You know, you're going to not find what you're looking for. That's the only real downside. So, you know, go for it. Ask other writers. You never know when people, there's someone that we had in our group here that moved over to the Coeur d'Alene area, and he wrote me and said, do I know any groups over there? And so I was able to send him the email contact for someone from that area. And this, not you, Jerry, this was somebody else. And so he's going to contact her from North Idaho and find out what's in the, I mean, there is communication, you know, but you have to do the work. I mean, nobody's just going to hand you stuff.
Yeah. The nice thing about Zoom is that you're not stuck with just people in the local neighborhood. And in the middle of winter, when it's snowy, you don't have to worry about getting to the library on time.
Yeah, yeah.
I was curious if anybody had any ideas about Reddit and getting critiques off of Reddit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's got to be.
I saw that cringe.
But everybody's different, and everybody's looking for something that might, you know, some of these things might not fit you. Other things will be perfect, and you didn't even know they existed. I mean, look at us. How many of us that are here tonight didn't know the guild existed a few months ago? And here you are. See, and it's wonderful. So, was that you, Denise?
Yeah, it was me. I cringe. Sorry. It makes me nervous sharing work with strangers off of some sites. It's like I almost feel like some are more I don't know. You're going to find more valuable contacts, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if it's just my association with Reddit, like what I look into it or whatever, but I guess you can find them anywhere and you can find trustworthy people, but
hence my apprehension.
That's why I cringe. Sorry.
No, hence my apprehension. Because as a lot of people on Reddit actually put is, yeah, I've been lurking for a long time. Yeah. Lurking about all I think I do.
You know, I read some good advice recently. And actually, I went to a Readsy workshop, and a couple of great editors were talking about this. And she said, in general, there aren't going to be any ripoff people at that site if you're hiring them. Once an editor or anybody is found out in a community to be untrustworthy, that's it. They're cut off. And so most of the time, you know, over 90% of the time at least, you're going to be able to deal with these people. Now, I wouldn't be giving people money without signed contracts. And I would certainly look at their, what is that called, bona fides? And look at their indication that they're trustworthy. I mean, they have, and find out what other people have they worked for. Get in touch with those people. Ask them what they thought, because you have a right to do that. If an editor says, I'm sorry, I can't share any of that with you, well then say, well, I'm sorry, I have to move on then. Because, and we're going to have a session on scammers. I think that's even maybe the next one. And we'll talk a little bit about what to watch out for. And okay. Any other, yes, Paul?
Thinking about people stealing your work, a friend of mine who's also a writer, we sat and talked, and I gave him some ideas about one of the things I was thinking of putting into a book. And about 3 months later, I found it in his manuscript, and he'd forgotten, of course, that I talked about it. But I don't really feel bad about it. He took it and ran, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel bad about sharing things with anybody who's, you know, who's pretty much honest. They're going to change it anyway.
And most writing, most books are, it's about the writer, how the writer deals with it, because you can't really find any idea or topic that hasn't been written before. You just can't. Life is not that wide a, you know, span of things. But it's the writer. How does that writer do it? And that's what sells the work. Almost never is it the idea that sells the work.
It's how well they do it.
Yeah, exactly. The quality.
Well,
Well,
another thing, I was in a group one time where one person there expected really thorough critiques of his stuff, but never made any comments on anybody else's stuff. He liked to be, you know, even-handed.
yeah, there's a wide range of people you might run into, and you can choose to either deal with it or walk away. You know, if that group is going to allow too much space for that person, then and you can't deal with it, then don't try. But if you can hang in there and go toe to toe with them, you might be able to, you know, pull it off.
Well, in the group that Paul and I were in, when you pass out your copies, and everybody has a copy and a pen, pencil in hand. So as soon as I start reading my wonderful piece of literature, all these people around me start writing things. So it's like I have to tell myself they're only writing good things. Enjoy reading. Don't worry about what they're writing, you know, but it's, I've been through 100 meetings and it still bugs me,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and there's always the issue of at what point are you in your writing? Because if you've already done 5 revisions of your work, it gets harder and harder to be pleasant about critiques, you know. But if you're starting and you're really asking for people to tell you, I want to know where I lose the audience, because
Sure.
I have to deal with that. I want to know if I've changed the character some way with no explanation, you know, or things like that. Structural changes like that can be very important. And it's important to get that stuff as close up front as you can, And this is why editing is usually put farther down. You don't deal with punctuation and all that stuff till later on, because if you're going to make what happens if you get this wonderful nitpicky critique or proofreading of a chapter and you decide to dump the chapter? That's a waste of time. Everybody wasted their time. So it's pointless to do that until the revisions have brought up a product that's at a level where now let's look at the quality of the actual things going into it, you know, the spellings and the structure and that. It's a waste of time to do it too soon.
Linda.
Yeah.
Sandy again.
Hi, Sandy.
I just have to say, you know, one of the groups I was in, we passed out, you know, copies for everyone. And it is maybe a little worried when people are writing, but I found myself looking at other people's work, and there would be phrases that were just incredibly wonderful, beautiful, phrases that just jumped out at me. And I usually marked those and it said, I'm just blown away by this. And so if we find something positive to say, and there may be a little something, and me, I tend to leave things out, or it's good if people say, hey, what did you mean here?
Yeah, yeah.
And that helps. But it's truly some incredible things happen in others' work, and it's fun to be able to say, oh, I just love this.
Yeah, it's an important part of critiquing. Find out what's good.
Yes.
Because the writer learns from that too. They learn, like I said earlier, ooh, more of this. This kind of the character depth is great, you know, or this person is so two-dimensional and so that I don't even care about them. I don't care what happens to them. This is your main character. Who cares what's going to happen? I mean, I don't even like them. So, you know, those things are important to know.
There's
And
one
don't
addition.
do it like I just did. You don't have to make it like it's something horrible, you know.
There's one really important factor is when you're critiquing, you're also learning.
Yes.
I know when I sat down and read Sue's stuff, it was always a learning experience, and I felt like I was getting more from it than actually anything I was suggesting.
There you go. Excellent. Well, we are really running. It's like 20 after 8. So I'm sure people are going to be just about the latest we've ever gone, I think. Any last comments before we, should I stop the recording? Do you have terrible things you want to say about something you don't want recorded?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's
Thank you,
not
Linda.
Thank you so much.
Horrible. It was good.
Thank you. You're
Thank
wonderful. Get in touch if you want anything, okay?
Thank you for your research.
Yeah, thank you for your research. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Yes,
Made it all
very
worthwhile.
helpful.
Thanks for
Yes,
So
your
thanks,
fun.
Linda.
Thank you.
Linda, I have a real quick question before I
Well,
go.
you just stay on.
Okay.
Everybody can kind of, you know, if they want to, they can. And I've
We'll
gotta-
see ourselves out.
I've got to stop the recording somehow or other here. See.
Thank you so much. Everyone was so kind and fun. I learned so much.